We all know it by now, artificial intelligence is reshaping business with new risks and opportunities emerging. To talk more about this, we've got with us today Oseas Ramirez. He's a partner at Axialent and CEO of Stoic to discuss the dilemmas of AI adoption and the mindsets that leaders need to have in this new era. Oseas, welcome to the set. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you.
Okay, first and foremost, for those who don't know what Axialent does, tell us what the company is all about.
Axialent basically helps large organizations with cultural transformation, which basically means how do you help an organization change the way people think and behave in service of business goals and obviously within ethical boundaries.
And what specifically do you do around the AI?
So Stoic, which is a spin-off that was created under my tenure as CEO at Axialent, was basically a company that we created to, I guess in short, create better leaders and more of them, utilizing AI as a tool.
I'm sure there's got to be a framework around this. Do you want to talk us through what needs to happen in order for companies to be able to roll out AI effectively?
Well, there are many aspects to that. The first thing that I would say is leaders need to get a better understanding. One of the things that we have seen is that we have senior leaders that don't really understand what the technology does, and they're the ones responsible for setting the strategy for the company. It's not a good place for a leader to set a strategy for something they don't understand. Now, this doesn't mean that they need to be technical experts. That's not what I mean. But they do need to get a sense of what are the possibilities. We call this the art of the possible as a better way to set a strategy. That's where everything begins. And then you also have to empower employees because they're the ones closer to what's happening and they'll get a better sense of what you can use AI for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As a leader, you don't need to have all the technical skills. In fact, most of your time as a leader needs to be spent, managing people. So what specific mindsets are crucial here?
Well, first, just
and skills.
Mindset and skill. Well, mindsets we could basically define as the ways of thinking that you have that may be unconscious and that then drive behaviors. So for leaders, there's a few mindsets that could be relevant. The first one is going from understanding technology as something that can be predictable, and now when you're in AI, is understanding this is not a deterministic technology. It will not always give you the same response. That doesn't mean that you should not use it because of its unreliability. That means you need to change your mindset. This is a different type of technology. Part of my role now is discovering what can this technology do and what it cannot do for my industry at this given point in time because it's going to change. That is an example of a different mindset. Another mindset would be understanding that there are ethical and legal implications because of the previous aspects that we mentioned. So that's another part of the ways of thinking that are more conducive to be successful. In terms of skills, I would say that both for leaders and employees alike, there is the skill of actively discovering what can this technology do for our industry, for our use cases at this point in time.
When we were talking to you about coming on the show, you said that you could talk about AI hype versus hope and how there needs to be more nuanced conversations around this. Talk us through that.
AI is very interesting because it's a very polarizing technology.
Correct. Yeah.
And what we've seen in public discourse is you have very brilliant people that are essentially setting up a doomsday scenario. AI is going to finish humanity. And like brilliant people like Jeffrey Hinton, he's one of the founding fathers of AI, Nobel Prize winner. So this guy knows what he's talking about.
Well, I also watched an interview by the CEO and founder of Anthropic, who said that it's going to wipe out, 50% of white-collar entry-level jobs in a few years.
Yeah, so there's a conversation of whether it's going to end humanity, kill a lot of jobs, and many other things. But what I was trying to point out is there is that pole, that extreme. Then you have another extreme saying, no, this is actually going to bring a bonanza of humanity, let's say well-being and abundance. So the way that I like to think about this and explain this to leaders is imagine a 2x2 quadrant in which you have hype, let's say, as very low or very hype on the x-axis, and then maybe on the y-axis you have low hope or high hope. By hope, I mean believing that this technology can actually be very impactful.
Right.
So let's say on the quadrant of very high hype, very high hope, you'll find the AI evangelist. This is going to change humanity.
Got it.
On the let's say, not very high hope or very low hope, but very high hypes. People
That's
are
a
thinking
doomsday scenario.
doomsday scenario. And then we have on the other quadrants, I would say, cynicist and pragmatist. So what we're trying to work with business leaders is situate yourself not at the edges, but find yourself and dynamically change and update your perspective.
There's
given
a
what we're
sweet
seeing.
spot?
I think there is a sweet spot, but it's not fixed.
Okay.
The sweet spot today may change in a couple of weeks when the technology evolves, and I think leaders need to be dynamically positioning. This is just as part of their understanding to better guide their business decisions.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Everything is, nothing is deterministic, as you said. You've been here a few days, a couple of weeks.
Yes.
What has your assessment been of the landscape here in the context of how leaders are adopting or not adopting to AI?
Well, as it is in most countries, it's quite heterogeneous depending on the industry and depending on the leaders. So I would say if we had a spectrum, we had leaders that are still just like waiting and seeing, and I think in some cases a little bit of denial and lack of understanding, which makes it difficult to go into action. All the way to the other end of the spectrum, in which there are leaders of certain industries in which they have no option because this is an existential threat. We've seen this, for example, in the BPO sector,
Yes.
when they have already had to adopt AI, but it's mostly to reduce costs. So there's being, layoffs, etc. And one of the challenges that we like to present to leaders is, okay, once you've gone through the phase of cost cutting, what can you do to augment employees to create new value? Because otherwise you're just improving or maintaining your bottom line, but you're not creating anything new.
Right. You're not really growing. Yeah.
You're not really growing, you're not offering anything new, and that's something that AI can also provide.
They're not thinking that far ahead yet.
Exactly. The cost cutting is like a short-term, immediate measure, obviously depending on the industry, how necessary it could be, but the augmenting is not that long-term.
For the CEOs and leaders that are hesitant to jump in, what's been the biggest issue? Is it the cost of it? Is it the fear of the technology? Is it that they feel they don't have the skills? What's been the factor holding them back?
I think it's a combination of all of those. As I mentioned earlier, if you don't understand something, it's very difficult to try to lead it. That's one of the challenges. The other, I guess, another version of the challenge is, I don't understand this, I'm going to pass it on to somebody else. So they usually select the chief fill-in-the-blank officer. We have chief innovation officers. Now we're seeing the chief AI officers.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's something I'm starting to see, yeah.
Unfortunately, many of these chief officers are unempowered and under-resourced. Sometimes they're individual contributors or have very small teams, no budget or very small budget, and in most cases, they can't make any decisions. So you either have leaders that are not doing it, or they're passing it on to people that can do it, and I think that may come from, fear, not understanding, a little bit of resistance, etc.
What does that mean, unempowered? That means they've not been deputized to make decisions on behalf of the organization?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. If I am chief AI officer and I can't decide we're going to be using this technology for these use cases, we're going to maybe work with the legal department to allow this type of uses, with IT department to permit this, then essentially they just become evangelists inside of the organization. That's not very effective.
For companies that are looking into it, let's say I'm a mid to large size local company that's looking to adopt AI, but we don't have the skills, we don't have the capability, but we know it's a technology that could make us more productive, more agile, and so on and so forth, and we come to you. What would you say is a logical first place to start in order to, as you begin this journey?
Well, the first is to come to the realization that in many cases, especially younger employees, are already using it a lot.
You're talking about LLM.
Well, we're talking about large language models, which people would essentially know. ChatGPT is obviously the number one. You also have Gemini from Google. You have Claude from Anthropic. Those are like the three big ones. And yes, that is the main type of tools. There's many others. And that type of tools we've seen in several studies from McKinsey, BCG, et cetera, that like the younger employees, they're already using them. Now, they might not be using them adequately, not in the most effective way. But what I would say then in terms of getting started is, I guess, getting the acknowledgement that this is already happening. Then how do you work with the managers layer for them to understand how do you set objectives? How do you maybe do all the managerial tasks that you usually do, delegation, evaluating performance? How do you do that in an era in which people can use AI? And then there's obviously the component of upskilling. Let's teach people how to use this adequately. Quite honestly, right now, there's an abundance of resources on the internet that just a little Google search is going to give you more than enough for people to learn the basics.
You don't even have to sign up for expensive courses.
No. You could even ask ChatGPT, tell me how to use ChatGPT. Like, give me 5
That's
steps.
true. That's kind of like Inception, huh? Ask me, what do they call it, being in a parallel world? But what about the cost factor here? I mean, does it take a lot of money to, reformat your company in order to be more AI responsive, or is that a myth?
There are free versions of products. So let's talk about the cost of technology. You could start with free versions of the products. They're not as powerful. Might not be a bad place to start. There are some other costs that have to do with processes. If you just throw AI at bad processes, you're going to magnify the bad outcomes of your bad processes. So it's important to invest in improving whatever processes you have before trying to accelerate them with AI. That would be one way of thinking about it. There are some other costs that you may incur in terms of making sure that you're compliant. For example, when we work with clients in Europe and they have to comply with local data laws about data privacy, that's not as easy as you may think. That's not as just throw ChatGPT into people. You have to do some of that heavy lifting. But these are not investments in most cases that will outweigh the benefits if you do them correctly.
So there is a plethora of options, basically. You're not constrained to just having to buy a tailored version, for instance. You said that the Philippines is heterogeneous in terms of AI adoption, but how does it compare to the rest of the region, for instance?
Look, that's a tricky one. I read a report by Microsoft saying, the Philippines is leading the world in AI adoption by 86%. Like, that sounds very good. Then you consider that the BPO sector is very large. I read it's like 1.8 million people.
It's so essentially the second leg of the economy.
Exactly. So then that's where you make the interesting connection. So high levels of adoption. Then you look at the BPO sector, and you're seeing that in many cases, AI is being, given to employees to carry out some of their tasks. And one of the things that I read is, for example, in call centers, AI is pretty much telling them what to say, evaluating whether they're doing it the right way, deducting points if they make mistakes. So then that is not necessarily AI adoption as reflected by this very nice statistic. This is more like now you're using AI, in many cases, as a manager of humans. And the question that we present to leaders is, who's the pilot? Who's the co-pilot? And I would expect that in this industry, humans should remain the pilots, not the co-pilots to an AI. So that's what we need to look deeper into the numbers and see what's behind them.
So you can't really compare it to the rest of the region, but in terms of the opportunities for the country, what are you seeing here? Just very quickly.
Look, the country has several industries, and as far as I understand, not being a deep expert in the country itself, but what we've seen is, given how heterogeneous adoption is across several industries, there is a large opportunity to start reaping the benefits. I would always say, just take it through the lens of what type of new value we can create versus just looking at it, how can I decrease my cost and keeping doing the same? Because that will not increase your competitivity, your being competitive. That will just, protect you from your business being disrupted.
Yeah, that's great advice. You got to look at it from a more holistic sense, in other words. Final words of wisdom in case there's a CEO watching. Where should they start? What should they do if they are looking to start this journey?
Learn how to use it, model it. There's a framework that we have, which is define, demonstrate, demand. If you want to define what to do, you should better learn a little bit about it. Then you demonstrate. Here's how I'm using it. And once have you said that, you've defined, you demonstrate, then you can demand. Now we're all doing it. So it starts with the leaders.
Does using ChatGPT every day count?
Look, as Sam Altman would say, older generations are using ChatGPT as a Google replacement. I don't say that counts.
It doesn't count?
Well,
that is what most people use it for.
Well, that is the most basic of use cases.
Oh, okay.
You can use AI, for example, as a strategy partner. Think about a strategy. But if you're asking it questions, it's itself insufficient. What I would recommend leaders is ask valuable, pertinent, extremely detailed questions. Your question can be 1 page long. Ask it to Claude, ask it to OpenAI, ask it to Gemini. compare, and you make the decision. If you only ask one AI, I would say that's irresponsible and a little bit lazy. When you ask the three of them, you'll see that they have perspectives that are better to integrate. Same thing, if your question to AI about a deep topic is 2 lines long, same thing, it's lazy thinking. You really need to figure out how to ask an extremely precise question. I have a specific tip. When I ask questions to AI, when I need to do something complex, I tell it, you are the leader of a multinational company that has specialists in all these areas. Help me cover this question through the voice of this expert, and this expert, and it'll bring you different perspectives.
Fantastic.
That's just an example.
Fantastic advice. We'll leave that there. Thank you so much for talking us through that. Oseas Ramirez, partner at Axialent and CEO of Stoic, talking to us about the dilemmas of AI adoption and the skills, the new skills required to succeed in this landscape.